In this world, healers are revered for their extraordinary gifts, often ascending to powerful ranks that shape kingdoms. There's even a royal academy dedicated to forging the nation's finest healers, a beacon of hope and skill. Healers are ranked first class, second class, or third, each step a testament to their prowess. But then there's Xenos, who doesn't even hold a license to practice. Yet for him, fear is a stranger. He's the laid-back soul who helps those he can... No questions asked. So he set up a humble clinic on the kingdom's edge, a sanctuary for anyone desperate for aid. After treating a weary man, the gratitude in his eyes was clear, but his pockets were painfully empty. So he offered every last coin he had left. Xenos shrugged off the payment. This wasn't a job for profit. Once the man left, Xenos' assistant, Lily, reminded him of a house call waiting. He quickly prepared to leave, and Lily promised to save him some dinner when he returned hours later. There, he spotted a wolf girl, her pain etched deeply across her face. Just then, a nobleman caught up with her, barking accusations. Where had she been? She tried to explain her stomach agony forced her to seek the hospital, but they denied her care. No money, no mercy. The noble sneered, convinced a mere stomachache wasn't worthy of hospital time, especially for a slave with no health insurance. He dragged her along, ordering her back to work without delay. At the graveyard, he callously threw her to the ground. She hit a tombstone hard, pain flashing through her body. This noble didn't care about her health, more like tossing fish into the river than a human being. Worse still, as she collapsed, a dark, ominous energy invaded her very being, but the nobleman, blind to her suffering, accused her of faking and demanded she stand immediately. She couldn't pay and held her hostage. He stepped closer, threatening her with cruel words. If you don't obey, you'll be the next to lie in these graves. But she was nearly immobile, so he kicked her, sending her rolling across the dirt. Growing impatient, he ordered her to scour the cemetery for anything valuable. Then he turned his back and left. Perhaps the pain peaked, or some dark force took hold, but suddenly the wolf girl snapped, claws flashing as she tore a fierce tattoo across the noble's belly. The noble couldn't believe it. Never before had he suffered such a wound. "I say..." He tried reasoning with her, but remembered his cruel fists. Her rage was no empty threat. So, with all the speed of a crippled turtle, he fled the scene. A nobleman rushed to seek his help, breathless, recounting how his slave had gone mad and was intent on killing him. However, Xenos had witnessed the way he treated the girl in the streets, and he understood that the nobleman deserved this fate. The girl, the werewolf, quickly caught up, and the nobleman begged Xenos to save him. Xenos glanced at her and instantly recognized the dark aura surrounding her. He asked the nobleman what he had done to make her lose control, but the nobleman dared not admit to abducting her for grave robbing, simply claiming he was out farming for loot, which was, in reality, just as illegal. He tried to divert attention by emphasizing his severe injuries, pleading for immediate medical help. He even promised to return her belongings and pay Xenos if he agreed to save him. But Xenos had no interest in money. Yet, he had sworn to save lives. So when the girl lunged to attack, he swiftly pulled the nobleman aside. She retaliated by hurling a rock at Xenos, but he sidestepped the attack. It was easy to see how this was a game for the nobleman, thinking Xenos could easily kill her, but he resolutely refused, believing killing was against his principles. The nobleman scoffed, wondering if this was some heroic movie playing at prime time. If he didn't kill the werewolf girl, she'd surely send him to his demise. But Xenos remained unmoved. As a healer, his mission was to save as many lives as possible. After stating that, he punched the rock she had thrown with ease. Is this even something healers normally deal with? He realized the girl was moving extraordinarily fast, much faster than a regular person, so he knew something was very wrong. Not wanting to cause her serious harm, he erected a shield just as she charged at him. She rebounded off and crashed into a nearby building. By sheer coincidence, the impact destroyed part of the structure. Debris fell perilously close to the nobleman. Though Xenos was quick enough to save him, he chose to turn a blind eye once the commotion settled. Xenos approached the girl. Her leg was broken from the earlier impact, and she was struggling to crawl in agony. Still in a feral state, Xenos allowed her to bite his hand to keep her calm. He sensed she was possessed by an evil spirit. So, he placed his hand on her head and began to heal her, exorcising the spirit from her body. He succeeded, but couldn't help but wonder what she had done to warrant such possession. Regardless, he still needed to deal with that spirit. Then, he used a final purification spell to destroy it. Afterward, he returned to the girl and, seeing her back to normal, continued to heal her broken leg so she could walk again. At that moment, the nobleman crawled out from the rubble. Astonished to see Xenos could heal the girl's leg in the blink of an eye, still gravely injured, he opened his mouth to plead for his life. But Xenos told him he was off the clock. The nobleman would have to wait until the next day to receive treatment, knowing he would bleed to death in a matter of hours. The nobleman continued to beg for immediate help. Finally, Xenos agreed but warned him the cost would be higher. The nobleman, desperate, poured out all his money to pay. The amount was far greater than the typical healing fee, so he believed Xenos would be satisfied with it. But to his surprise, Xenos said it still wasn't enough. Usually, he didn't care about money. But because of the nobleman's reckless behaviour this time, Xenos felt entitled to negotiate in a more capitalistic manner. The nobleman threatened to report him for extortion. But Xenos didn't care. He had no license to practice anyway. So what did he have to fear? He was essentially an illegal healer, and the nobleman was no stranger to illicit activities, especially since he had just been out grave robbing. Nevertheless, Xenos was willing to negotiate. He stated that, besides the gold, he wanted the girl as part of his payment. The nobleman, having no regard for her, immediately agreed. Once Xenos healed his wounds, the nobleman handed over the girl's slave contract and stormed off in anger. Xenos then sat beside the girl, waiting for her to awaken. When she finally came to, she was surprised to see a man sitting next to her and asked who he was. "Are you serious right now?" And indeed, he was entirely serious. He explained that he had spent a significant sum to acquire her, so he needed to check if there were any defects. Since she could not disobey her master after inspecting her body closely, Xenos quickly identified the issue. The pain she experienced was due to a gallstone stuck in her duct. For him, handling this was a swift task. He placed his hand on her abdomen and performed a magical operation. In an instant, the stone was extracted and dissolved. She felt no more pain. Astounded, she asked him what he had done. Xenos gently explained that he had opened her up, removed the stone, and stitched her back up all in less than a second. This procedure was completely routine. In his words, Xenos thought it was no big deal. But she knew well that not just any healer could accomplish such a feat. She thanked Xenos for saving her, but he told her that a simple thank you was not enough. Since he had invested in her, he expected her to work to pay off her debt. Initially, he intended for her to serve him with her body, but it turned out he only needed her to guide him to the plant he was searching for. She found the request a bit odd, but still led him to the bush containing the exact leaves he needed. She was surprised, asking if that was truly all. She was ready to do much more to repay him. But Xenos just smiled and said that was plenty. He always demanded a worthy price for his efforts, and her help in finding that special leaf was enough to settle the debt. He tore up her contract, giving her the freedom to do whatever her heart desires from now on. Yet, I felt a whirlwind of confusion, unsure of where my life would lead, now that I was no longer a slave. But now, she could freely explore everything life had to offer. She wondered if she would ever see him again, and Xenos replied that if she were ever in need, he would be ready to heal her once more. Though, of course, not for free. Meanwhile, back at home, while Xenos was still busy outside, Lily had begun preparing dinner. The aroma of her cooking was so enticing that the spirit of Camilla, a resident ghost, couldn't help but appear to see what Lily was making. Lily spotted her, and Camilla expressed her excitement to taste Lily's dish. But since the food wasn't ready yet, Camilla had to return to her room and wait. Just then, a girl named Sophia walked in, looking for Xenos. Lily informed her that he was out tending to patients, so he wasn't home at the moment. But since he was absent, she decided to stay and wait. However, Sophia wasn't the only one wishing to see Xenos today. Just a few minutes later, Linga also arrived looking for him. Lily had to explain that Xenos was still out. Linga agreed to wait, though she was quite surprised to see Sophia had gotten there first. She had planned to let Xenos examine her completely, but now that plan had evaporated into thin air. Not long after, a girl named Louis burst in unexpectedly, knocking the door right off its hinges. Lily welcomed her and told Louis she could come in, but only after fixing the door she had just demolished. Louis had a crush on Xenos too, but today she came because she had caught a whiff of Lily's cooking from afar and desperately wanted to taste it. Finally, once Lily had finished cooking, she went to take care of a few last-minute tasks, leaving the girls in the kitchen. But the moment Lily stepped away, the half-breeds could no longer resist the intoxicating aroma of the food. They decided to sneak a taste, but it seemed that one little bite quickly turned into almost emptying the pot. They started realizing they had truly caused trouble because when Lily returned, she would surely be furious. And sure enough, Lily came back to find the pot nearly empty. Whoa. She smiled at the girls and asked them to explain themselves clearly. That night, Xenos finally returned home. Lily apologized for not having dinner ready for him, as she had promised, but she added that she had a plan in place. She had sent the girls out to gather ingredients, so dinner could now become a true feast. But before heading to the kitchen, Lily realized Xenos must be exhausted after a long day of work, so she said she would brew him a cup of tea to help him relax. Xenos had once been a member of the world's top adventurer party. But one fateful day, the leader, Aston, hurled a gold coin at him, a cruel reminder that he was just a pitiful wretch, and declared he was kicking him out of the group. He called Xenos useless, claiming his presence only disrupted the team, and that they would be better off without him. But Xenos knew all too well he was the only one holding this team of 1,000 burdens together. Yet, Aston dismissed him, admitting he had recruited Xenos merely to serve as a meat shield, because if he were to fall in battle, no one would care. Now that the team had gained enough fame, Xenos tried to explain that the only reason they hadn't logged out yet was because he was always there to heal them after Aston's reckless antics. But Aston mocked to Xenos, belittling his healing skills as inadequate. Any other healer could do a better job than him. Meanwhile, 2 slavers were trying to restrain a female elf. They intended to bind her and sell her off. The woman among them warned her partner to be careful, not to harm Lily. As elves are a rare breed, if she remained intact, she would fetch a higher price. The man pinned her to the ground, but Lily refused to submit easily. She kicked him hard in the stomach, and as he gasped for breath, she made her escape. She might have gotten away if he hadn't brought a bow and arrows. He shot an arrow that struck her ankle, sending her crashing to the ground, unable to run any further. He caught up and tried to grab her again, but she bit down hard on his hand like a rabid chihuahua. In the end, he resorted to pulling out a knife to free himself. Just then, Xenos happened to pass by and saw Lily lying on the ground, blood pooling around her. He asked the two if they were responsible for this atrocity. They glared at Xenos, telling him to get lost because it wasn't 1865 and they had the right to do as they pleased with Lily since she was their property. He knew they were right, legally. He couldn't help her. There was nothing he could do to save her. But then, an idea struck him, and he offered to buy her. He handed over the gold coin Aston had thrown at him. Normally, they would refuse because a slave elf was worth far more than that. But since Lily was bleeding profusely and nearing death, they decided to take the money and leave. Once they were gone, Xenos approached Lily to check if she was still alive. She had resigned herself to her fate, telling him to leave her there and go, but he insisted she wouldn't die on his watch. Lily looked down at her wound, astonished to see it had healed completely. She thanked Xenos for saving her and apologized for making him spend gold to rescue her. Yet, he didn't want to keep the gold because it reminded him of Aston. He asked Lily if she had anywhere to go. No, but being a former slave, it was likely she had no home or money. Lily was also very hungry, so Xenos suggested they find something to eat and buy her some clothes before figuring out their next steps. He took her to a nearby eatery, and on the way, he bought her a new outfit. Lily happily devoured the food he bought her, but she was a bit surprised that he didn't order anything for himself. He said he wasn't hungry, but the truth was he was running low on funds, Everything he had left was spent on food and clothes for her, and since he had been kicked out of the Phoenix team, he would soon have to find work if he didn't want to starve. Just then, a man staggered into the eatery with an injured arm. He had just survived a horrific battle and was clearly not in good shape. From a distance, Xenos observed the gaping wound on the man's arm, along with several burn marks, and deduced that he had been shot by a magic gun. This wasn't too serious since the man belonged to the lizard folk, whose bodies could heal themselves in a few days. However, the wound was rather deep, so it was best to treat it immediately. Xenos raised his hand and cast a healing spell, and in mere seconds, the wound on the man's arm completely closed. The man was utterly astonished to see his arm restored to its former state. He asked Xenos who he was, but before he could answer, Lily eagerly introduced him as the VIP Pro Healer. The man had never heard of him, but was incredibly grateful and offered Xenos some coins. He even promised to pay him for his services. Xenos initially felt confused as to why someone would give him money. Then it dawned on him that healers usually got paid after treating others. Suddenly, he had the idea to open a clinic and become a professional healer. But since he came from a slum, getting an official license wouldn't be easy. Not to mention, if he managed to open a legal establishment, he'd have to pay taxes too. As a wise man once said, tax evasion isn't a crime, it's a duty. That's why Xenos decided to become an underground healer. Sure. Lily didn't quite understand what he was saying, but if he planned to open a clinic, she wanted to help. He pondered for a moment because running a clinic without a license was illegal, and he wasn't sure if he should drag an innocent child into it. But Lily quickly reminded him that he had just bought her a few minutes ago, so he was her master now, and her duty was to follow him to the ends of the earth, no matter how many laws he broke. Firstly, Xenos had no intention of being anyone's master, he simply wanted to help her. Secondly, Lily pointed out that she had nowhere else to go. If he didn't take her with him, and she ended up enslaved again, it would all be his fault. In the end, he reluctantly agreed to let Lily accompany him. She would serve Xenos with every fibre of her being. He begged her not to speak in such a strange way anymore. After all, if he intended to open a clinic, the first step was to escape homelessness. He led Lily to a deserted area in the city to find a place to stay. When she asked him why he wanted to live in such a rundown place, Xenos explained that he needed to hide from the Royal Association, so they wouldn't discover his illegal clinic. Moreover, with the area being so dilapidated, the housing prices were just right, and for someone with empty pockets, it was even better. Lily couldn't deny it, but she still felt quite anxious knowing that terrifying monsters often inhabited places like this. Eventually, they found a house that was still intact. But the moment Lily laid eyes on it, her face went pale. It truly looked like the opening scene of an average horror movie. If they were unlucky, they might even encounter a spirit. He had no idea what a spirit was, so Lily explained that they were terrifying undead creatures capable of turning a person into a ghost with just a touch. They stepped inside, but the house was shrouded in darkness, so Lily suggested using the light spell. Xenos was surprised that Lily knew how to use magic, but she only knew a few basic spells, so she thought it was nothing special. Thanks to the light, they could see clearly, and just as Lily had predicted, although the exterior was creepy, the interior was actually quite cozy. But Xenos remained as optimistic as ever. This place still had a roof intact and sturdy pillars, so Xenos thought opening a clinic here was a home-cooked plan. However, they encountered a major problem. There was indeed a spirit living here, and she declared she would drain Xenos of his life force. Panic ensued, while Xenos just felt a bit amused that this house already had an owner. The spirit named Camilla attacked him, but he effortlessly used a healing spell to throw Cora off and destroyed both her arms. Xenos wasn't scared of Camilla at all, for back when he was in the Phoenix clan, whenever Aston got mad, he would push him into a labyrinth all alone. And there, he had to face spirits constantly. He had already defeated at least 100 of them. It turned out the healing spell actually turned into gold. Back to the main issue. Xenos apologized to Camilla for barging into her home, but since there was nowhere else around, he asked if he could stay with her. Camilla felt insulted that Xenos dared to suggest living together with the Queen of Spirits, so she summoned her minions to chase him away, But Venus swiftly used a high-level healing spell and wiped out all the minions in an instant. Camilla was astonished by Venus's power and began to worry. He could eliminate her at any moment, but Xenos really didn't want to fight. He just wanted a place to call home. So he asked her if he and Lily could use the bedroom as a place to treat patients in the future. Camilla knew she couldn't defeat Xenos. She reluctantly agreed to let them use the first floor, while she would keep the second floor for herself. Xenos felt satisfied with the arrangement, but Lily was unsure should she fear Camilla or Xenos more. Moreover, the next morning, Lily felt utterly bored due to the lack of patients. So she asked him if it might be a good idea to advertise a little. But Xenos thought that was a terrible idea. Why risk getting caught in illegal business for a game? Besides, he was confident that customers would come soon, and just as he predicted, only a few minutes later, someone walked in. Lily stood up to greet the first customer, and was surprised to see that it was the man Xenos had treated. Xenos wasn't too surprised. Either he had anticipated that he would return. After all, what good citizen would allow themselves to be shot with magic bullets like that? And people like him certainly wouldn't want to visit a conventional hospital. To clarify, the man introduced himself as John and mentioned that today he needed Xenos to examine his sister's condition. Xenos assured him he would do his best, so Sophia showed him her injury, a skin wound on her arms. She said her arm had started feeling strange since yesterday. With just a glance, Xenos recognized that Sophia had been hit by a poison-type spell. Sophia asked if there was any way to treat it, but Xenos shook his head. She had let it go overnight. Thus, all the tissue in her arm had died. He spoke plainly, stating that the best course of action was to amputate the entire arm to prevent the poison from spreading. Jovia felt quite disappointed upon hearing this, but she accepted her fate. She asked Xenos how much the amputation would cost. He told her she had to pay 1,000 gold immediately. He was ready to lash out, but Sophia told him to stay calm. Then she moved on to negotiate with Xenos, asking if he really wanted to charge such a high price when the patient was Sophia the Whirlwind. It turned out that Sophia was the leader of one of the 3 largest gangs in the area. He knew exactly who she was, but he refused to work for free, especially since regenerating a body consumed a lot of energy. Yeah, she found it strange since she had never heard of a healer who could regenerate an entire arm. He was equally surprised, as he didn't realize that other healers couldn't do that. He was self-trained to become a healer, so he was truly unsure of what was considered normal and what was special. But now wasn't the time for debate. He asked Sophia if she wanted the surgery, and she nodded her agreement. Thus, Xenos laid her down on the table and prepared to proceed. He conjured a scalpel, but Sophia felt a bit anxious since she had never seen anything like it before. Xenos explained that it was a blade created from compressed minerals, so he could summon it at any time. It was sharp and completely sterile, making it perfect for surgery. However, most healers couldn't do that. Xenos began the surgery, continuously casting healing magic to numb the area of her arm. Then he amputated the infected part and prepared to regenerate a new arm. He normalized the healing magic and began to reconstruct Sophia's arm layer by layer until it returned to its former state. Sophia was astonished and immensely grateful that Xenos had truly recreated her arm. Thus, she had no further objections about the price of 1,000 gold. She even said she would start sending her injured subordinates to him if he agreed. He didn't mind, as long as they paid him in full. In the following days, Xenos began receiving many patients from the Lizardmen faction. Lily brewed some tea to help him relax. Xenos thanked Lily for her thoughtful care, but he wondered why she made 3 cups of tea when there were only 2 of them. Lily replied that the 3rd cup was for Camilla. Xenos was skeptical. He wasn't sure if Camilla would come down to have tea with them, but it turned out that Camilla loved tea. While everyone was resting, Lily asked Xenos why the Lizardmen faction's members often suffered severe injuries from the patients he had treated. Xenos guessed that a turf war was happening between the factions, and just as he mentioned the factions, a group of wolfmen burst through the door of the clinic. Their leader, Linga, declared she would kill Xenos. She said she had been fighting against the Lizardmen for days, but no matter how much she injured them, they still got treated. It was infuriating. As the ancient said, if you can't resolve the problem, you should eliminate the one who created it. Xenos explained that he wasn't working for the Lizardmen, and he didn't want any fighting in the clinic. But Linga ordered her subordinates to attack anyway. However, against Xenos' defensive magic, they stood no chance. Linga quickly realized she couldn't defeat Xenos, so she resorted to trashing the clinic to drive him away. That was an extremely foolish decision, since this was still Camilla's home. Camilla could not accept anyone daring to vandalize her home, so she appeared immediately. As soon as Linga and the wolfmen saw Camilla, they scrambled for cover, for the spirit was an extremely dangerous monster they could never hope to fight. Camilla intended to drain their life force, but Venus quickly intervened, asking her to calm down. He didn't want anyone dying in his clinic. He said as long as Linga and her subordinates were willing to make amends, he would overlook this incident. Lately, Xenos' clinic had been thriving. He was continuously receiving patients from both the Lizardmen and the Beastmen factions. Not only that, but now a snail had come to say that their leader, Lord Louis, was sick and wanted him to come examine and treat him. So Xenos told him to bring her to him, but the snail refused, stating that Louis was currently unable to move at all. Moreover, the Beastmen and the lizard folk constantly brought pastries and constructed buildings around here, so Louis couldn't dare to charge into the heart of the enemy like that. Genos sighed wearily and decided to follow the guy to their lair. He traversed through many dark caves before arriving at the throne, where Mother Durung Lydian sat, surrounded by a crowd of snails. Xenos introduced himself, but Louis said she had already heard about him, as both the lizard folk and the beastmen did not. Xenos felt quite annoyed because he genuinely didn't want his clinic to be compromised. He didn't pay much attention since he didn't have a license to practice, so if the royal court got involved, it would be all over for him. He asked her what her problem was, but Loi Wai challenged him to figure it out himself. Xenos calmly approached and examined her body for any signs of injury. He looked for external wounds, but found nothing. Then, he decided to check internally and soon discovered her stomach was slightly swollen. It wasn't from pregnancy, but rather a Minone lump. He looked at her and asked, "How did this happen?" Loi Wai explained that she had accidentally swallowed an explosive stone. Xenos asked, "Did anyone try to poison you?" But she denied it, saying she just accidentally swallowed it while eating rice balls. He turned away, telling her to just wait. She would be all right sooner or later, but Loi stopped him, saying she had even chewed on it a bit. Thus, the stone was even more prone to explode. Now, just a little movement could trigger it, but it was light for the ones carrying her. The snails immediately surrounded Loi, declaring they would rather die with her than abandon her. Xenos didn't care much about this situation and planned to leave, but Loi mentioned she had a massive treasure hidden in a chest and wanted him to retrieve it. Xenos felt a bit confused, thinking she was joking. However, Loi immediately tossed him a golden key, telling him he could use it to open the treasure chest. Xenos asked why, and Loi said she had heard that Xenos always charged fairly. Even with children, he didn't take a single coin. She admired that about him and wanted him to continue spreading such good deeds. He sighed and finally decided to get to work. He turned back to approach Loi, then took out a scalpel and made an incision on her abdomen. The snails panicked, ready to rush in to attack him. But before they could do anything, Xenos extracted the magical stone from Loi's belly and healed her instantly. Loi was in shock, having lived through countless dumplings without ever witnessing something like this. But she immediately warned Xenos to throw the stone away before it exploded. However, he remained unfazed, holding the magical stone in his hand. It exploded just as Loi predicted, but as the dust settled, Louis called him, questioning why he treated her for free when he could hoard the treasure all to himself. Xenos replied that he always charged a fair price, and what she offered was more than enough for a simple procedure. After that day, the leaders of the three factions, the Lizardmen, Beastmen, and the Oasis began to visit Xenos regularly. Even without a reason, he thought they were simply bored. But Lily suspected all three were vying for his attention. Camilla confirmed, and told him that all three had fallen head over heels for him and were about to go to war over it. Xenos brushed it off, insisting he was just a regular healer, living a normal life. But Camilla's words turned out to be true. One day, all three leaders came to visit him in succession. They brought gifts while simultaneously declaring that tomorrow would be a bloodbath. The next morning, the three factions gathered on the battlefield with their soldiers. The soldiers were happily chatting while preparing for the final battle to determine who would truly be the king of the underworld. However, just before the fight began, Xenos and Lily unexpectedly appeared in the arena. Instead of stopping the girls from fighting, Xenos casually told them to just let it out and get it over with. After receiving their nod of approval, Sophia pulled out a dagger and lunged at Linda, who was about to strike first. But the beast woman, Linda, swiftly dodged the attack, and the leader of the Oasis jumped in to attack Sophia, just in time to evade and retreat. Then the life or death battle officially began, all factions clashing with one another, waiting to deliver fatal blows. The spectacle was utterly shocking to behold, but then things began to feel a bit off. Why was that? They fought all day, yet no one fell, and not a single person gave up. All their wounds mysteriously healed before their eyes. Finally, the leaders realized that Xenos was continuously healing all of them at the same time. He nonchalantly stated that he didn't care how long they planned to fight, but since they were all his patients, he would keep healing them until they grew tired of it. At that moment, the leaders of the three factions began to laugh as they realized how foolish their actions had been. They decided to sign a peace treaty and rule the underworld together. Lily was overjoyed with this outcome, while Xenos mumbled about charging an arm and a leg for it, as healing so many people at once was truly exhausting. As the story concluded, dawn broke. Krishna left the clinic, and Xenos watched her walk away, filled with compassion. How could a woman who once loved and protected those in the slums be killed by them? With a kind heart, Xenos still believed that anyone could be good. Camilla immediately noticed his contemplative expression and approached to talk. She advised him not to worry about what Krishna said, as just because her mother was good didn't mean Krishna was too. If that were true, she wouldn't despise the slums and oppose peace so vehemently. With 300 years of experience, Camilla claimed to understand people like that very well. Xenos was grateful. She reminded him that he hadn't taken down the flag hanging outside the clinic. That flag was hung to keep the mutants away, to avoid conflict with Krishna. And, indeed, during Krishna's time there, no mutants had come by. Once the flag was lowered, Sophia immediately came in for treatment, almost at the same moment. Krishna returned. What a twist of fate. The reunion between her and Sophia had never gone well, and this time was no different. Both immediately drew their guns, ready to shoot each other, but Lily quickly intervened. She pretended that Sophia was just lost. But who would believe such a ridiculous excuse? Krishna didn't buy it either. She questioned why Sophia's arm grew back after being shot. Sophia confidently asserted that some intermediary must have used magic to heal her. However, Sophia wasn't in the mood for a back and forth. She coldly stated that she had escaped being lost and wanted to leave. Before departing, she offered a piece of advice if she truly wanted to find the mastermind behind the human traffickers. It was better to seek the roots of the issue, rather than blame the poor. Krishna didn't understand. So Sophia explained that the head of the trafficking ring was actually a noble, not the impoverished people in the slums. Krishna was skeptical because she held the belief that the rich were good, and the poor were bad. She became defensive at this point. When Sophia revealed that the culprit was a wealthy noble named Calendar, Krishna immediately objected. Sophia became even angrier, shouting that the only one who believed in the poor was the very intermediary Krishna wanted to kill. She tried to awaken Krishna to the fact that being poor didn't equate to being wicked and that Krishna needed to change her mindset. The debate escalated to the point where Xenos had to intervene. He confessed that he was the intermediary, but his personality didn't match the image Krishna had of him. Krishna thought the intermediary only knew healing, while Xenos possessed both healing and defensive spells. He admitted he had both, but Krishna didn't care to listen any further. All she knew was that he had sided with the mutants, and she could no longer be friends with him. She stormed off in anger. However, instead of heading home, when she met Calendar, she pretended to have received bad reports on the security situation in the area, wanting to check if he was okay. Calendar took her to inspect his security system, and everything looked just fine. But then she suddenly became suspicious about the security arrangements. So, she feigned a bathroom break to sneak around the house. When she spotted a well, she leapt right into it. Krishna was horrified to discover several children bound and blindfolded. Hearing her voice, they felt a flicker of hope amidst their fear. Just as Krishna struggled to free the kids, Calendar appeared and shot her. Krishna fell, helplessly gazing at the children, heartbroken for not being able to save them. She thought of her mother, realizing she had never truly been a hero. Calendar approached, mocking her. What right did a mere knight have to interfere in noble affairs? As Krishna braced for death, Jophia and Xenos arrived just in time. Hello, Xenos. Every bullet a breath away? With calm resolve, he snatched the gun from Calendar's grip and knocked him down. Xenos demanded an apology from Calendar, who was clueless about whom to apologize to, only stammering for mercy. Then, in a slip of the tongue, he apologized to Krishna, prompting Xenos to fire. But the nobleman survived. Krishna thought she was destined for the altar, pleading with Xenos to save the children, but he insisted she must be the one to do it. He then healed her wounds. Krishna was taken aback, calling Xenos a hero while feeling she could never be one herself. Yet, Xenos pointed out how the children gazed at her with admiration. They rejoiced at her presence, and Xenos explained that a hero isn't perfect, but is someone willing to help others. Together, they left that place with the children. Before departing, Xenos reminded her she still owed him for his healing. It was the first time Krishna smiled, though it felt oddly out of place. The next day, Xenos and Lily walked together. He encountered the place he once lived in the slums. The sight conjured memories of his past. He was the orphaned child, destitute and aimless, sitting silently in the shadows of the alleyways. One day, Aston wandered through the slums, looking for a child to use as a shield but hadn't yet found the right fit. At that moment, he spotted Xenos and deemed him the perfect choice, approaching him to strike up a conversation. Aston casually mentioned that Xenos was poor and unemployed, and since he was hungry, why not join him on an adventure? He spoke with polite, sweet tones, all the while hiding his true intentions. Xenos mistook him for genuinely kind-hearted. Despite that, Xenos hesitated, knowing how far-fetched it was for someone from the slums to become an adventurer, but Aston reassured him that it was merely a matter of skill. Then he asked Xenos if he had any special skills, to which Xenos replied that he had some healing knowledge. A child orphan can learn on his own. However, whether Xenos truly knew how to heal didn't matter to Aston. His only aim was to use Xenos as bait should anything go awry. After Xenos agreed to join, Aston led him into the forest. There, the two unexpectedly encountered a monster. During the battle, Aston sustained a minor injury, and Xenos cast a healing spell for him. Then, he charged forward to attack the wolf, and Xenos continued to enhance his speed, allowing him to easily behead the creature in one swift strike. However, in a baffling twist, Aston failed to realize that his wound had completely healed right in the middle of the fight, and much like in SAO, he suddenly moved faster at the critical moment. Thus, he still believed Xenos to be useless. After years of exploiting him, Aston finally ditched Xenos. We all know how Xenos fared, but Aston's group wasn't as fortunate. After removing Xenos from the team, Aston and the remaining members ventured into the cave to take on their next mission. This mission held special significance as the group aimed to impress the powerful nobles. Despite everyone's frustration over the heavy workload, Yuma encouraged, "The sooner we finish, the faster we can get back to the tavern for another round." Andres was eager too, knowing that whenever they mentioned being part of the Phoenix team, girls flocked to them, as they were renowned for completing missions flawlessly and vanquishing beasts without a scratch. Just then, they faced the monsters they had come to eliminate. Austin drew his sword and prepared to attack, ordering Dew to cast a protective spell before charging ahead. Indeed, even though Austin's hand was still burned, at that moment, Yuma was ambushed by a wolf from behind her. In a split second, Austin shouted to Andres, "Andres, attack quickly!" But he took too long to conjure his spell, and to make matters worse, he was hit by a fireball while reciting the incantation. Austin wondered, has my team always been this useless? It was clear they were about to be roasted, so he ordered a retreat immediately. Once outside the cave, Aston confronted his teammates. Why are we struggling against monsters ranked B and below? It's worth noting that Aston couldn't even handle the wolves himself, so he had no right to preach. Dew questioned whether Venus had ever truly healed them, but Aston dismissed it, insisting that a commoner could never master healing spells. To be safe, Aston thought their group should recruit a healer. A few days later, they returned to the cave after recruiting a new healer named Umin, who made it clear from the start that she wasn't skilled in healing during combat, as she typically worked in the capital. She had simply agreed to join them because she happened to have an adventurer's license. However, she was curious why a renowned team like the Phoenix team needed a healer, as they had built a reputation for completing missions without injury. Aston refused to explain, curtly telling her, "Mind your own business." Yuma then asked Umin if she knew how to heal wounds, as he had suffered severe injuries from the wolves last time. Yuma was the one who treated Y, so she was fairly confident he would survive. However, due to the severity of the wounds, Yuma would never return to being an adventurer again. One would think Aston would at least show some emotion. Yuma felt sympathy for the teammate who had been permanently disabled, yet he merely nonchalantly remarked that keeping Yuma around was pointless. If Y was wondering why this mission was so crucial, it was because the noble had commissioned a scarf made from the fur of a firefox as a birthday gift for his daughter. If this went well, the entire group could win the favour of Lord Fennel for Aston. The scarf was so precious that he was willing to risk his life to obtain it. But in less than 12 seconds, the plan shattered as wolves ambushed them. Aston immediately countered and ordered everyone to cast defensive spells. He couldn't slash a single wolf. The wolves launched 4 fireballs, and the 4th struck Andres in the stomach, and he collapsed on the spot. Swinging his sword, Umin shouted for them to retreat immediately. Andres's condition was too dire. It was unbelievable that everything was crumbling once more. When the group got outside, he exploded in rage, even though they couldn't use a defensive spell in SAO. Min pointed out that Dew had indeed cast one. If he hadn't been too busy yelling at himself, he would have realised Andres had already taken a hit. Aston, impatient, ordered Umin to heal him immediately. But she retorted, "Healing magic. Only high-level healers or saints can heal without preparation. If we don't get Andres to a medical facility right away, he won't make it." Days later, Aston spoke with the Lord's servants and learned that the Lord was extremely disappointed. Desperately pleading for another chance, he assured them that if given another shot, he would definitely bring back that fierce tiger fur. But the birthday of the lady, Lord Fenno's daughter, had already passed, making it pointless, with nothing left to do. The real reason was that Lord Fenno felt disappointed, not just because the Phoenix team had failed, but because Aston had sworn too many times that he would complete the mission. Had he simply informed Lord Fenno that this task was impossible for some reason, the Lord would have been sympathetic and chosen another gift for his daughter. But Aston hadn't done that. In a moment of weakness, Aston considered blaming Xenos entirely. However, he suddenly remembered he had never officially registered Xenos as a team member. This meant that on paper, he had never been part of the Phoenix team. Therefore, he couldn't hold him accountable for anything. Swallowing his guilt, Aston bowed his head low and had to apologise for everything. Inside, he seethed with resentment, feeling bitter about having to humble himself before a mere servant. Yet today, Aston vowed to find a way to make amends. Lord Fennel's servant wondered how he planned to do that, especially since half of his team was nearly incapacitated. With unshakable confidence, Aston replied that he would recruit new members to compensate, and, next time, if entrusted by Lord Fennel, he would undoubtedly excel. After that, Lord Fennel's servant left, and Dew turned to Austin. "Is it really wise for you to keep blabbering like this?" "No, because right now they have no promising candidates, and the other 2 can't complete the mission either." Aston reassured Dew not to worry, as he already had a plan in mind. Though he didn't hold Xenos in high regard, Aston couldn't deny the team functioned far better with Xenos on board. So, he intended to bring Xenos back. He was confident that he would agree to return immediately, even though he had been treated like the lowest in society. The next day, Dew ventured into the slums to find Xenos, But as they had no idea where to start, Aston suddenly had a brilliant idea. He was certain that the lower class would do anything for money. Don't say it's heart-shattering. A while later, a lizard man led him to Sophia and reported that Aston wanted to hire her services. Sophia wasn't particularly interested, since this would interfere with her usual consultation hours, but she was still willing to hear out a paying customer. Aston introduced himself as the leader of the Phoenix group. Then he mentioned that he was looking for someone named Xenos, so at first, Sophia couldn't believe what she just heard because Xenos had told her everything about how Aston kicked him out of the Phoenix group. It seemed he had gone beyond foolishness, but she didn't expect Aston to be foolish enough to seek Xenos out again. She immediately told Aston to leave, as Xenos currently had far more important things to do than waste time on him. And to be honest, just looking at Aston made her want to vomit. Aston felt insulted, almost ready to strike Sophia, but he quickly realised he would get wrecked if he did that. So he decided to back off. After being turned down by Sophia, Aston resolved to approach Linda's faction. But as soon as she saw him, Linda immediately demanded he leave. Aston was shocked to learn that Linda also considered herself a friend of Xenos. And to ensure Aston wouldn't pull any tricks, Linda warned that she could eliminate him 3 times before he could blink. Aston continued to seek out Louis, but just like the other two, she instantly told him to get lost. She even threatened if she heard he dared to harass Xenos again, she would personally crush his skull with her thigh. He tried to convince himself they must be confusing him with someone else, that named Xenos, because in his mind there was no way someone like him could have such influence. In that moment, Ju happened to spot Xenos walking down the street with Lily. The two had just finished shopping and were heading home when they suddenly called out Xenos' name. Xenos was startled to unexpectedly run into Aston and Du, but he felt no joy and quickly turned away. The two walked away. Aston loudly declared that he was here to officially invite Xenos back to the Phoenix Guild, but without letting him finish, Xenos outright refused. Aston couldn't believe he was being rejected. He had been certain that Xenos would jump for joy at the chance to rejoin the team. But Xenos began listing all the injustices he had endured under Aston's leadership, from terrible working conditions to a meagre salary. To put it plainly, there was absolutely no reason for him to want to return to the Phoenix Guild. However, if Aston was truly desperate, Xenos suggested he could temporarily take on a few tasks during his free time. But this time, Xenos would not work for free. Aston would have to pay him fairly. Xenos demanded 50,000 for minor healing and 1,000 for serious injuries. Additionally, if Aston wanted enhancements or protective shields, he would have to pay separately for those as well. If these conditions were unacceptable, there was no point in discussing further. Xenos turned to leave once more. Aston felt deeply insulted. How could Xenos dare to refuse this favour? A true gentleman fights, not talks. He drew his sword and struck, but before he could get close, Krishna intervened. She coldly stated, "You dare attack someone right in front of the royal knight? You out of your mind? I'm actually here to find you." But since Aston had instigated the situation, she had no choice but to restrain him. And just like that, he ran away, for he definitely didn't want to be caught by the authorities. Xenos and Lily returned home. Not long after, Sophia, Linda, and Louis came to visit them. They recounted how Aston had tried to hire them to help track Xenos down. Even though all 3 had firmly rejected him, Sophia still worried that he wouldn't give up so easily. If Aston decided to turn to illegal underground guilds, he might hire an assassin. Although Xenos had personal grievances, hiring an assassin typically costs a lot of money. Not to mention, Aston would have to personally seek Xenos out instead of recruiting a new member, so it was likely he was already running low on funds. Still, Sophia felt uneasy because she had heard disturbing rumours about a mysterious figure known as the Guides. He worked for underground guilds that accepted assassination missions completely free of charge, provided certain special conditions were met. If Aston happened to convince the Guide, Xenos would truly be in danger. Sometime later, Xenos found himself unable to sleep, his mind still tense from the encounter with Aston, to the point where Camilla had to come downstairs to keep him company because she was quite worried about him. During their conversation, Camilla asked if it was true that Xenos had learned healing magic while living in the slums. Xenos replied that at first, he had tried to cast a resurrection spell, And then, somehow, he naturally gained healing abilities. Camilla reminded him that resurrection spells are forbidden. Also, why shouldn't I? Forbidden spells, Xenos honestly said. But I didn't know anything at the time, so I just experimented. Just sharing, he added, when forbidden spells came up. Camilla suddenly remembered her time alive when the Demon King reigned. He had exploited golems created from such spells to wage war. At that moment, Xenos heard a commotion from outside. Camilla immediately volunteered to see what was happening, and she froze when she discovered that much of the slum was engulfed in flames, caused by a gigantic golem rampaging through everything in its path. Camilla panicked, fearing that her mentioning golems had inadvertently cursed the city. At that moment, the giant golem appeared, wreaking havoc. It destroyed everything in its path, frightening the citizens into a chaotic flight. Xenos immediately rushed to the scene to assess the situation, and Camilla followed him. She noted that having an ancient weapon appear in the slums was highly suspicious, and they began to wonder how it had come to be there. At that moment, BA, the leader of the gangs in the slums, arrived. Xenos breathed a sigh of relief to see that they were safe. The girls said they weren't hurt, but their subordinates were not so lucky. After taking a look at the giant monster, they asked Xenos what it was, as they had never seen anything like it. Xenos explained that it was an artificial creature created from a magical technology thought to have long been extinct. He relayed that one of his soldiers had reported that this golem originated deep within the slums, and Xenos suspected that an underground organization was behind it all. However, they needed to prioritize saving people first. He instructed BA and the girls to quickly gather all the injured in one place and vowed that anyone responsible would pay dearly. Meanwhile, the one who had sent the golem was watching everything from a distance. He was an assassin, known as the Guide, and the mastermind behind the attack. Daju? Yes. He had agreed to take on the job after Aston approached him with a desire for revenge. But he didn't even demand much money because what mattered more to him was Aston's motive. When he learned that Aston simply wanted to take out his anger on Xenos and everyone close to him, he laughed with delight. He accepted the job because his twisted nature found satisfaction in pure hatred. After that, he showed Aston the core of the golem he was developing and confidently stated it would be enough to eliminate Xenos. At that moment, he was watching the spectacle of the golem wreaking havoc in the slums. He thought sheer destructive power would suffice, yet the speed still left him wanting. He began to imagine how Xenos would feel as his loved ones slowly faded away, but Xenos would never allow that to happen. As the group of demi-humans gathered all the injured, he immediately unleashed a powerful area healing spell, successfully restoring everyone in an instant. Afterward, he continued to tend to the lighter injuries, though frustration boiled within him. He wanted to see her safe, even if he didn't know if it would cost him anything, and right now, Lily was still trapped in her hiding place. The Guide observed everything, seemingly impressed by Xenos' healing prowess. However, he understood that as long as the golem loomed outside, healing everyone would be futile. What he truly wanted to see was how Xenos would counter it. Once the healing was done, Xenos finally felt a bit of relief. He gazed at the golem, still rampaging through the slums, wondering if it might just tire itself out eventually. But Camilla quickly extinguished that hope. She remarked that such a beautiful picture was far from reality, as the golem would not stop until its orders were fulfilled. By her guess, the golem's command was likely to destroy the entire slum, or something along those lines. Xenos, hearing this, could only facepalm in helplessness, but Camilla continued her analysis. By now, golem construction should have been impossible, as activating them required a type of mana stone of incredibly high purity, which only existed in the 6 southern territories, once ruled by the Demon King. According to history, most of that stone had been almost entirely mined out. Moreover, the dark art of creating golems had long since been lost, and the materials needed to assemble a complete golem were so rare they were nearly impossible to find. Thus, Camilla genuinely couldn't understand how AI could gather enough resources to create this. Xenos told her that the AI no longer mattered. Right now, their priority was to take down the golem. Camilla warned that doing so would be dangerous, but the girls volunteered to fight alongside him without hesitation. They couldn't let this monster destroy their home any longer. Xenos asked Camilla how to destroy the golem, and she replied that they needed to destroy its core, otherwise it would continuously regenerate. However, Xenos felt a pang of regret, knowing that if they destroyed the core, it would no longer be sellable. Still, he led the girls toward the golem, urging them to give it their all. The girls rushed in, while Xenos supported them from behind, enhancing their strength and speed. Immediately, they felt their power and speed surge to incredible heights. Just one strike was enough to crack the golem's leg, sending it crashing face first into the ground. But it instantly healed the crack as if the battle had never occurred. And just like that, it swung its arm, sending Lynn flying thankfully. She was lucky. Xenos caught her just in time and immediately healed her as if the wound had never existed. But Xenos struggled to find his rhythm in battle, having not fought in months. However, as the battle raged on, he gradually regained his form. He maintained just enough distance from the girls for his support spells to be effective, deftly switching between defensive and healing magic as the situation demanded. Meanwhile, the girl relentlessly attacked the golem, and Xenos noted it still required time to recuperate. He immediately ordered them to destroy both of its legs, and they complied without hesitation. Finally, the golem collapsed, but they belatedly realized a girl had not been evacuated, and the golem was about to fall on her. In a panic, Xenos rushed forward, having missed the girl earlier, hoping to save her. Unfortunately, he was too late to prevent the golem from falling. But surprisingly, the golem tried to protect the girl as if it still had some awareness. Xenos was astonished and quickly began scanning the golem while the girl escaped. Once the scan was complete, Camilla arrived just in time. She remarked on the golem's strange behavior, and Xenos confirmed it wasn't entirely artificial. He explained that the core of the golem was located in the left side of the chest, and it wasn't just a magic stone, but was indeed Aston from afar. The guide observed with a smirk, seeing that Xenos had uncovered his trick. Since no magic stone is perfect, he had merged them with a human to create the golem's core. This method made the golem harder to control, but he thought Aston was already filled with negative emotions and ignorance. He would be easily manipulated. He had deceived Aston into seeking revenge. To form it, he needed that magic stone and to merge Aston with it. Now, he merely wanted to see if Xenos would dare to kill his old friend to save the slums. However, Xenos had no intention of letting Aston log out. He would end this battle himself. He told the girls to withdraw, as, from now on, he would handle it alone, and they obeyed without question. Camilla also left as the sun began to rise, leaving Xenos alone to face the golem. He was certain Aston was inside it. He found it hard to believe that a selfish person like him could save a child. But then he remembered that Aston was haunted by his sister's death due to illness, as he had no money to save her. Xenos wondered if that girl reminded Aston of his sister. Then he thought perhaps there was still a glimmer of humanity left in him. But for Xenos, it was too late. Xenos pondered as he drew his mana sword and charged at the golem. The golem roared in pain as he advanced. He drove deep into the golem, revealing Aston trapped within. Xenos looked at him and declared that it all ended here. It's over. Without hesitation, he brought the blade down. From afar, the guide was utterly shocked by the scene. He never expected Xenos to be so cold-hearted. But he also understood that he might just be avenging the losses Aston had caused. He turned away, somewhat disappointed, but then realized something strange. He was destroying the parts of Aston's body fused with the magic stone, then reconstructing them into a normal human form. He continued this process seamlessly and accurately. It was incredibly taxing, yet Xenos pressed on. The guide was speechless, unable to believe that Xenos still had enough strength and focus after healing hundreds throughout the night. He began to doubt his entire strategy. Meanwhile, Xenos said, if Aston gets out of this, society will benefit, but dream on because that AI will have to take responsibility for the damages in the slums and pay for my overnight healing. And there's another reason I can't let him die because I know Aston has helped me twice. Once he got me out of a police situation, my first brush with the law, and again, He tossed me a gold coin. That coin helped me rescue Lily and changed my life forever. Secondly, Xenos explained that the final and most important reason was that because he was the healer, and he couldn't let any AI die in front of him. With that, he unleashed all his power, plunging his sword into Aston's magic stone, shattering it into pieces. Immediately, Aston was completely freed. As he knelt on the ground, he admitted that Xenos was so skilled he was sickened by it. He recalled how Xenos had protected the demi-human girls, and now it dawned on him. It turned out he had treated his entire team that way. He fell to the ground and begged to Xenos for forgiveness, even though he knew he didn't deserve it. Xenos told him to stand up. He would stand, but Aston said he wouldn't get up until forgiven. Xenos simply replied, "Get up quickly. Let me land one last goodbye punch." Aston, unable to react, felt Xenos use his last bit of mana to amplify his punch tenfold. He began to back away in fear, wearing a terrifying smile, revealing that there was another reason Xenos couldn't let Aston die just yet. He hadn't been able to hit him once. And then Xenos channeled all his inner strength, delivering a blow that sent Aston flying, his clothes torn away. Moments later, Aston awakened to find Krishna standing beside him. He asked where Xenos was. She replied she met him on the way, and he had recounted the entire incident. Krishna remarked that it was incredible, as no one had been seriously injured. Unbelievable indeed, and also mentioned that Aston would owe Xenos for life. Afterward, she proceeded to arrest him, listing a lengthy list of charges, and now he's added public indecency to his list of offences. It was only then that Aston realised he was merging with nature in an unexpected way. After that, Krishna handed him the message Xenos had left behind. He had sold Aston's sword and used the money to compensate for the damage in the slums. Aston suddenly realised he was now truly destitute in every sense, without even a shred of clothing to his name. However, Xenos had left him a parting gift. It was a single gold coin, reminiscent of a severance package from a past life. Secondly, Krishna added that Zeus never wanted to see him again. Upon hearing this, Aston began to weep like a child. Meanwhile, Zeus was trudging home when he unexpectedly encountered the half-elf girls on the road. They insisted on helping him, despite his reassurances that he was fine. Eventually, they managed to drag him all the way home. Lily immediately brewed a cup of tea to welcome Xenos back, firmly believing he would return safely. She began to chat about how the golem attack had affected everyone. Then she suggested they should visit the hot springs. Xenos agreed it was a good idea, but before he could mention that he had already promised to go with Sophia, Linda dashed off. She reminded him that from now on, he would have to go with her because he had promised. This only made Lily even angrier. Just then, Loy appeared. This time, Xenos cut straight to the chase. He asked if she was also here to invite him to the hot springs. She blushed and asked, "How did you know?" She was certain they shared a connection, as they were thinking alike. But Xenos pointed out that her true soulmate was Linga and Sophia, because the grand idea was to unite all three of them. Before long, Krishna also arrived, and Xenos immediately knew she wanted to invite him to the hot springs too. Thus, he reluctantly agreed to her suggestion. At this moment, he felt profoundly hurt, as she sat quietly, forlorn. Xenos wondered why the girls loved going to the hot springs so much. Regardless, he turned to ask Lily what she was about to say earlier, but she yelled back that it was nothing. And when a girl says it's nothing, it usually means it's something significant. Just at that moment, Camilla popped up, playfully poking fun. Lily had already been surpassed by her rivals. Then she turned to Xenos and declared she wanted to join them too, since it had been many years since she last visited the hot springs. Not long after, Xenos arrived at the hot springs to soak in the warm water and wash away some of his exhaustion. He thought to himself that his original plan had been to live as a recluse healer and enjoy a peaceful life. Yet, here he was, everything turned upside down. However, he still cherished these moments of solitary relaxation. Yet he remains unaware that this is but a fleeting calm before the storm. Suddenly, the bathroom door swings open, and Sophia steps inside. Xenos, in a panic, feels his soul leave his body. He thought this was the men's bath. But she simply replies that She had put up a notice. "Snap of my bass." She reassures him that the tub is being cleaned, so he needn't worry, no one else will enter. She steps into the tub and confesses she wants to take a more proactive approach with him, yet she knows deep down that might not be the wisest choice. Okay. She begins to share how much she's changed since meeting him. Slowly, she inches closer while trying to distract him with conversation. However, Xenos sees through her intentions. With nothing left to lose, Sophia decides to go all in. A fan of hers rushes in, tackling him and pressing closer. At that moment, Linga arrives, bursting in on Xenos, claiming she feels dizzy, but it is Sophia who manages to catch her, and the two begin a verbal spar, throwing themselves at each other. Afterward, Becca gets to the point he tells Xenos that he wants to hire him to investigate some missing persons. Thanos interjects, asking if it's even his area of expertise. But Becca explains he just needs to ask a few questions, as he's been granted special intern status. He has access to many programs that regular students cannot join, provided he has the right recommendation letter. Xenos understands that this will make information gathering much easier. However, he worries that AI might discover his true identity. But Becca has prepared a detailed script from A to Z to counter that. He instructs Xenos to simply pretend to be a talented therapist, just returned from abroad, as a well-known therapist backs him. So no AI will suspect him. Afterward, Xenos arrives at the dormitory, surprised to find Lily welcoming him home. He asks her what on earth she's doing here, and Uman explains that family members are allowed to live in the dorms. Lily proudly declares that she is Xenos' wife, but Uman reminds her that officially she's his sister. Xenos thanks her for handling the paperwork to bring Lily here, as he truly worries about her well-being. After that, Uman leaves as well, when it's just the two of them. Lily starts acting like a long-lost wife, and Xenos asks who taught her these antics. Clearly, it was Camilla, since his aunt also moved in with him and caused no small amount of trouble. Xenos warns her that there are many therapists around, so if she's not careful, she'll be expelled as soon as someone notices. But Camilla retorts, "Living dangerously is what makes life worth living. What do the chickens know?" The next day, Xenos is having breakfast with Uman in the cafeteria. He asks her how to get a therapy license. She explains that first, he needs to enroll in preparatory school to improve his basic knowledge. Then, he must attend a recognized hospital for a few years. Afterward, she mentions that if he passes the hospital's exam, he can become a licensed therapist. Xenos is taken aback, exclaiming that licensed therapists must be incredibly skilled. Uman is astonished by him. He doesn't even recognize his true abilities. She explains that once licensed, therapists can work at the Royal Hospital or become adventurers. Some even directly enlist in the military or serve nobles. Once they've accumulated enough experience, they can take exams to advance. Xenos feels a headache coming on just thinking about all the tedious procedures. He then asks Uman who the first missing person he needs to find is. She reveals that the missing person is her senior named Alfred. He is also a senior therapist and the deputy head of the lab she works in. Sure. She continuously praises Alfred. He's so kind and intelligent. He played a vital role in developing essential medicines alongside Becca. Xenos inquires if she has any leads. None. But before Uman can respond, a group of therapists enters the hall, led by an elderly man with an imposing demeanour. Xenos asks who that person is. She informs him that it's Professor Gohan, the deputy director of the hospital, and a senior level 7 therapist. What does level 7 mean? Uman explains the hierarchy of therapists, which includes beginner, intermediate, and advanced levels, divided into 7 ranks. A level 7 therapist, advanced, is the highest position an ordinary person can achieve. Only then can one be promoted to elite therapist. Xenos appears quite impressed. Uman adds that the hospital director is too old to work regularly now, making Gohan the most powerful person here. However, since he took power, everything has changed significantly. For instance, only wealthy patients receive proper treatment. She mentions that he cares more about his political career than improving his therapy skills, and there are rumours that he achieved level 7 due to connections with the high nobility. Xenos decides to steer clear of him, but Uman insists he cannot, as Guran is one of the main suspects in Alfred's disappearance. He has recruited many talented therapists under his wing to solidify his position. He even requested Becker to let Alfred work with him for a time, and since he funded Becker's research, he had to repay the favour. Moreover, Alfred himself wanted to expand his CV. However, just a month after collaborating with Guran, he completely vanished, and Guran simply claimed he knew nothing. Xenos understands the situation, but wants to know how to approach Guran now. Uman advises that if he continues to excel in various fields, Guran will come looking for him. Xenos is skeptical, as he still underestimates himself. But before Uman could elaborate, the rude red-haired guy named Kristen appeared, launching into a barrage of baseless insults at her. As he walked away, Xenos began to inquire about who that was, prompting her to explain that they used to be classmates. However, after being chosen by Guran's group, he seemed yet to vanish from the face of the earth. Regardless, Xenos resolved to attend class, and on his way, he reflected on the teachings of his master, who had instilled in him and his classmates the purpose of becoming healers, not just to heal wounds, but to mend the entire world. His thoughts sharpened just as the class began, and the professor commenced the lecture on the Andes. Xenos had a decent grasp of the topic from his days as an adventurer, yet he remained impressed by the structured teaching methods in the hospital. Then, the professor shifted the discussion to ghosts, the highest tier of undead. He stated that there is still scarce information about them, as they are exceedingly rare. Moreover, most adventurer teams that have faced them have already met their demise. He emphasized that if you encounter a ghost, your best bet is to run, and if that ghost can talk, it becomes exponentially more dangerous. Phew. The professor then asked if anyone had fought against the undead. The red-haired guy stood up, boasting that he had taken down 30 of them so far. He then turned to Xenos, asking if he had ever battled the undead. Though he had actually taken down about 50 monsters at once, he decided to keep things light for the orientation day. He casually mentioned he could handle around 30 at a time. Everyone was completely shocked, and the professor insisted he elaborate further. Xenos explained that if they ventured into the underground dungeon, they would find more undead than mosquitoes. The quickest way to deal with them is to cast a wide area recovery spell on all of them. However, the professor was even more astonished, as even top-tier adventurer teams wouldn't dare enter that area. Yet, Xenos spoke as if it was no big deal at all. On the other hand, Gresson was burning with jealousy and decided to follow him to the next class, so the next lesson was on healing magic. But Xenos found it rather pointless, since he could easily heal patients before finishing the spell circle. At the end of the class, the professor called on students to volunteer for practice. Christopher immediately stood up to show off his skills. After impressing the professor, he dragged Xenos up too, intending to make him the butt of the joke. All Xenos could do was draw the spell circle his master taught him. So, he just scribbled something on the board. But the professor was taken aback when he realized it wasn't a regular healing spell circle, but a resurrection spell. Far more advanced, Xenos remarked to the professor that this spell was quite unusual, as it could randomly regenerate a lost organ. The professor was even more astonished, stating that no ordinary human could activate such a spell due to its immense mana cost. But Xenos promptly demonstrated it right there, leaving the professor flabbergasted. He immediately tried to recruit him to his research team, while Xenos desperately came up with excuses to decline. Meanwhile, Gresson's jealousy grew stronger by the minute. Not long after, rumours about Xenos reached Goran, but he brushed them off, considering Xenos just a special research student. However, just then, a subordinate reported that Andes had appeared in a nearby graveyard. Goran immediately ordered a group of healing mages to handle the situation, instructing them to take Xenos along to test if he could really take on 30 Andes at once. Soon after, a team of mages led by Chris arrived at the graveyard. However, half of them were so scared that they started to back away. As soon as they spotted the Andes, they scrambled to chant a bunch of complex exorcism spells. They proceeded to take down each one slowly. Meanwhile, Xenos assessed their efforts as painfully inefficient. Min stood beside him, smiling as she remarked, "Of course, you would think that." In the end, All the mages gave up and huddled together, surrounded by 7 undead. But that was exactly what Xenos wanted. He immediately cast a massive healing spell over the entire area, cleansing the enemies in an instant. Everyone was left in shock, but Christopher rushed in to take credit, just like how he licked Ra's heels. He claimed to everyone that he had dispatched the undead, and the AI believed him wholeheartedly. Although Uman tried to explain that Xenos was the one who deserved the credit, he was completely indifferent. Even when someone shouted in his face, he would never acknowledge it. Xenos remained unfazed. Frustrated, Chris walked away. Xenos coldly stated, "They haven't finished with the undead yet." At that moment, a massive explosion shook the ground as a giant zombie king emerged from beneath the earth. All the mages were terrified but quickly turned to Christian, declaring they were 100% certain he could defeat it, unable to admit it was all a bluff. He turned to Uman for help, but she just scoffed and sarcastically suggested he let everyone admire the talents of the Fagoran members. Turning to Xenos, she was dismayed to find he genuinely believed Chris could handle the monster alone, reassuring her he wouldn't interfere. Cornered, Chris only managed to inflict a tiny wound on the zombie's body, and then it healed almost instantly. Despite dodging attacks in fear, Chris appeared flustered. He asked Uman why Crashton wasn't fighting back. She replied that from the start, he had been lying. He truly lacked any real fighting ability. She reminded Xenos not to rush in to save him, as he deserved a lesson to curb his boastful nature. But Xenos realized that Uman actually had feelings for Christopher. However, she was the type to be a pro-max level Tixander, adamant about not admitting it. Right then, Crashton finally got hit, and the zombie king seized him, crushing all his bones just as he was about to be struck down. "Help!" he cried out, but Xenos simply responded by unleashing a flurry of 10 radiant healing orbs that illuminated the space. They instantly incinerated the colossal monster. After the battle, Krillin and Uman began bickering again, but Xenos was beginning to realize that the monsters didn't naturally gather at the graveyard. They were drawn there by a stronger AI, the Zombie King. While an ordinary person might think the Andes flocked to the Zombie King, Xenos was sure the Zombie King appeared because Camilla was in the hospital at that moment, and she was the strongest Andes. Soon after, Xenos returned to the dorm and shared his theory with Camilla that the undead were attracted by a stronger undead, Camilla. Upon hearing this, proudly declared it must be because her Rick was so powerful that the monsters kept coming despite being weak. But then she grew serious and asked if Xenos planned to chase her away. Xenos replied that her presence could cause trouble everywhere, so it was better to keep her by his side. While Lily dreamed that Xenos would say that to her, Camilla was taken aback because since becoming a ghost, no AI had ever wanted her by their side. The next day, Gresson approached to submit his report to his superior. His superior had heard the rumours among students, thus concluding that Kristen was the one who had carried the team during the mission. He praised him for doing a great job, but noted that since Kristen did everything, Xenos had just been sitting idly by. Therefore, he didn't deserve to join Professor Goran's faction. He instructed Kristen to keep an eye on Xenos, just in case. Yet, that annoying orange-haired Crashton seemed to have a sliver of conscience left. He awkwardly admitted to her that Crashton was a superior, and it was Xenos who had actually defeated all the undead and the giant zombie king. Afterward, he left the office, cursing himself for missing a golden opportunity to win over the great Gohan, but at the same time, he felt relieved to finally repay Xenos for saving his life. Soon after, Becca informed Xenos that Goran's lab had taken notice of him. This meant his achievement in defeating the zombie king had been acknowledged. Xenos was surprised, thinking Kristen would take all the credit, but Becca told him that didn't matter anymore. Though Goran had noticed him, that was just the beginning. He still had to pass an interview with Goran to be officially recognized. Hearing that, Xenos felt utterly exhausted. But Becca added that Professor Gohan was the busiest and most important person at the Royal Medical Institute currently, and he doesn't waste time on ordinary folk. Xenos sighed, expressing his disdain for those who see themselves as the masters of the universe or Mother Nature. Becca replied that for Gohan, power and hierarchy are of utmost importance. Xenos thought, If that were the case, then Becca should actually be above Gohan, as he was indeed a very skilled healer. But Becca countered that things weren't that simple. First of all, he earned the title of elite healer through potion making, and that is completely different from becoming a truly great healer. Secondly, Goran holds significant political influence. But Xenos didn't want to think too deeply about such complicated matters, so he decided to visit Goran's laboratory first. It turned out Goran himself was present for the interview as well. Goran first asked Xenos what he could do. Xenos replied, "I can only heal." And of course, Goran was not pleased at all. Gohan explained that healers hold a special status in this country and have had a tremendous impact on its history. So, new knowledge was gained. Xenos Sate then declared that he was about to enter the ruling class to ensure that the healers received benefits commensurate with their contributions. He added that not everyone is equal, for those with wealth should be treated better than those without. Then, Goran requested Xenos to redraw the healing matrix he had previously sketched in class so that he could truly verify Xenos' skills. He stated that if Xenos could prove his strength right now, he would welcome him into his faction and ensure he would rise to a position worthy of his abilities. Without hesitation, Xenos sketched the healing matrix on paper, and despite trying to hide his astonishment, Gohan's eyes widened in disbelief. He then began to explain that there are many schools of thought regarding healing matrix drawing, but to be recognized, he examined the matrix that Zeus drew, noting it was unique and novel yet still adhered to the fundamental principles. Thus, he decided to recruit Zeus into his laboratory. The moment the professor left the room, Xenos let out a sigh of relief. The next day, Gohan began his show of strength in the Royal Y, followed by his subordinates. Seeing this, he cautioned Xenos over and told him to stand in line properly. Then, he acted superior like the others. He couldn't even remember the guy's name, but he couldn't even recall Xenos and asked why he acted that way. Garen bluntly revealed that he would exploit Xenos' rise in rank within Garen's faction, even though he was currently only a lowly jack. Anyway, Xenos discovered that Gohan frequently patrolled the hospital with his disciples to farm aura, and only tended to wealthy patients to save time. Xenos found this method quite inefficient, but he was also curious to see how Goran really worked. So, he decided to blend in to observe closely. Xenos rushed to the ward and saw Gohan examining a man with a sprained ankle. Gohan immediately called 3 disciples over and drew mana from them to heal the patient. Xenos was extremely amazed, as he had never seen such a healing technique before. Then he exploded with rage because Xenos had acted foolishly on his first day. Xenos asked the professor what skill he just used, and Garen called him a god. For not knowing something so basic, he explained that it was Garen's special mana transfer technique. He transfers mana from a healthy person to an injured one to help them recover. With this method, healers can heal severe injuries even if they themselves do not possess strong mana. However, healing serious wounds requires many people to donate mana, so that each person is not overly affected and only feels slightly exhausted. Xenos was extremely impressed and remarked that this must be why Gohan needed so many disciples. But Christian said there was another reason. The former director of the hospital was about to retire and would soon hold a vote for his successor. Goran already had enough influence to win, but he still wanted to recruit more followers to showcase his power. Xenos thanked him for the information and asked if he knew anyone named Alfred. At the mention of that name, Gordon became upset because Gohan had once placed high hopes on Alfred, but he then mysteriously vanished without a trace. Xenos was eager to hear more, but Christian only knew that Alfred had been invited to an intimate dinner hosted by Goran for all his favourites. And after that evening, Alfred disappeared that night. After that, Xenos relayed all the information to Becca and thought his mission had come to an end. But Becca told him that everything was just beginning. Becca asked Xenos to become one of Goran's favoured ones, so that he could be invited to the next dinner. Thus, he could find more evidence. First, Xenos lamented that he just wanted to go home, but he still decided to complete the mission as he wanted to learn more about his master. Second, Becca was pleased to hear this, and when he stood up, he intentionally dropped some coins on the floor. He quickly turned to ask Xenos if he thought each person's life was like a coin. Each person has a different value. Before Xenos could answer, someone else came to call Becca. Becca went to a meeting before leaving. The next day, Xenos was assigned to work with Krillin and was informed that today their task was to look after Gohan's dog. Xenos asked if that was the only job he did in the lab, and indeed, it was true. Christopher was simply a dog sitter for Professor Goran. Despite this, he always dreamed of being promoted and becoming Goran's close associate to live a life of luxury. Xenos felt quite uneasy, confused because for him, being a healer was about saving lives. Gresson sighed and said that ideals should be that way, but the real world is not. He confessed that he once had high hopes, thinking he would save many people, but soon realized that even healing had its limits. He stated that having money and power was better than having healing skills. Right then, a drunken man appeared and asked if he was walking Goran's dog again. The man mumbled, "I really hate that dog with the annoying face," so then he staggered back to his lair. Xenos asked Grayson about that drunk and learned that Bonds was Gohan's first secretary. Though Gohan didn't do anything worthwhile, he didn't fire or demote him because they had been friends for years. Right after that, they threw a bottle at Grayson and told him to catch it. Crashton couldn't react in time. The bottle fell to the ground and shattered right next to the dog, scaring it and making it run away. Now, Crashton and Xenos immediately chased after the dog, but it was too late as it had run onto the main road and was trampled by a carriage. They healed the dog using high-level healing magic, yet he couldn't shake the worry that this wound would leave a scar. Woof, woof, woof! He would definitely face punishment for this. Feeling sympathetic, Christopher Venus cast a basic healing spell on the dog, erasing every scar on its body. It was merely a simple healing spell. He picked up the dog and suggested it should rest for one more day. Afterwards, Ubin invited Xenos for a stroll. Xenos quickly sensed she had something on her mind and urged her to speak plainly. Realizing this, Ubin immediately apologized, expressing that if she were more skilled, she could have attracted Gora's attention herself. Xenos hadn't gotten tangled in this mess. She felt quite guilty, but Xenos reassured her that it was all right since he would be compensated by Baker anyway. Beyond mere monetary gain, he felt a sense of joy that this incident allowed him to step into the Royal Medical Institute, giving him a chance to learn more about his master. Speaking of which, Omin inquired about Xenos' teacher, but he struggled to describe what his master was like. Nevertheless, he proudly stated that he owed his life to that teacher, for not only did he teach him healing magic, but so many more. Omin replied, for her. Becca was that kind of person too, as he had guided her since she decided to become a healer. She inadvertently revealed too many private details about Becca, such as how his girlfriend left him due to his obsession with research. Xenos, intrigued, asked how she knew so much, and Omin unexpectedly disclosed that Becca was her uncle, the younger brother of her mother. However, she didn't have the talent he possessed. Xenos asked her what she was researching, and Omin, responded that she was working on pharmaceutical storage. Well, it's quite a boring topic, Xenos agreed, mentioning that his master used to say the most important things in life often stem from the most mundane. Then, the two began to converse more comfortably. Suddenly, Camilla's voice echoed from behind, proclaiming that Gino had found yet another potential wife. Omin, bewildered by the unexpected voice, was told by Xenos to ignore it. Shortly after, they returned to the dormitory. In the dorm, Christensen rushed before them, kneeling and pleading for help as he found himself in a dire situation. And he was starting to feel quite weary of him already. Mila told Xenos that this could turn out to be extremely interesting. The story was that a few hours earlier, Gohan had just returned from a meeting with a powerful noble who always supported him. The noble had asked Gohan to look into the rash spreading across his daughter's face, which was getting worse. Gohan immediately recognized it as the strange facial disease. The noble begged him to heal his daughter. Goran knows that this illness isn't life-threatening, but to remove the damaged skin from the girl's face, he must completely cut away that area before using magic to heal her. However, the girl's face may be left with permanent scars. Goran believes that if he has enough students ready to transfer mana to him, he could heal the wound without leaving a trace. The issue is that the girl won't let anyone see her scarred face and is incredibly anxious since Goran can't perform the treatment without a crowd. In the midst of his confusion, he decides to take a moment to relax with his beloved puppy. Yet, the moment he steps out of his office, he runs into his snarky assistant and faces mockery. His adorable puppy just got run over by a carriage. Goran erupts in fury upon hearing this news, but the drunken fool claims the caretakers have already treated the dog, and it's fine now. Goran rushes back to his room to confirm with a few trustworthy individuals. Indeed, the dog had suffered an accident, but seeing it completely unharmed, without a scratch, leaves him astounded. He thinks that the one who healed the dog, leaving no scars, might just have the power to heal the noble girl without a trace. And so, Christian gets dragged into this. Back in the present, Xenos decides to listen to Christian's request before making a decision. They head to Christian's room, where he pours out the details of the situation. He explains that Goran has asked him to heal the daughter of one of the 7 great nobles, and if he messes this up, he'll never live it down. Janos suggests he just cut away the deformed tissue on the girl's face and heal her afterward. But Preston sighs, saying a regular person can't do that. Umin then asks why Goran would entrust such an important case to someone like him. Gresson tries to appear confident, claiming Goran must have finally recognised his talent, but Umin immediately tells him to stop boasting. Gresson breaks down in tears, confessing the truth that when Goran asked who took care of the dog, everyone named him. Umin scolds him for taking credit when he clearly lacks the ability. But seeing how Lily clings to Thomas, Xenos wonders if these two are like a rainy day older brother and younger sister. Anyway, he tries to befriend Lily, but she bluntly states she doesn't want to get involved with a loser like him. Nevertheless, Xenos begins to consider helping Goran. The next day, the noble urgently summons Goran. Then, the professor leads Christian and Xenos to meet the noble, explaining that his daughter, Scarlett, still refuses surgery because she doesn't want any marks on her face, so she has locked herself in her room and won't let anyone see her, causing him great worry. He says he can only trust Goran to persuade his daughter. Everything will be fine. Goran is just as tense, but he agrees. The noble leads the healers to his daughter's door and asks her to let Goran assess the situation. Goran gently urges her, asking Scarlett to trust his skills. But she firmly declares that she won't let anyone bring a knife near her face. Scarlett turns out to be a girl with obsessive paranoia and narcissism. She believes someone from a rival noble family has plotted to harm her out of jealousy for her beauty. And now, everyone wants to ruin her face too. So, Christian decides to play along with her delusions and tells Xenos he will convince Scarlett to undergo surgery. Then, after she recovers, she will fall in love with him, and he will marry her to join the nobility. Xenos decides to extend the invitation without hesitation, and soon Christian asks Goran for permission to speak directly with the girl. However, Scarlett tells him she is trying desperately to avoid speaking with a petty assistant, and orders Christian to leave. With no other options, Goran gestures for Xenos to give it a try, and he sighs as he approaches the door. Then, Xenos calmly engages with Scarlett. He tells her that if she doesn't want surgery, that's okay, after all. Who wouldn't be afraid of a knife near their face? No matter the reason, he reassures her that the tumour on her face won't pose any danger to her health. So, if she doesn't want to, she doesn't have to remove it. Then, Xenos continues with his calm demeanour, calm and collected. Calm wraps up today's horror podcast. Just as he turns to leave, Scarlett opens the door. Frightened about leaving the tumour untreated, she allows everyone into her room and asks if it's true that the tumour will soon make her look like an old hag. But Scarlett immediately tells him to shut up because she can't stand his ugly voice. Hearing it makes her want to be sick. Scarlett steps in to mediate and confirms what Xenos said is true. Scarlett asks how to stop that from happening now. Scarlett states the only way to treat it is through surgery. Scarlett starts shouting that she doesn't want surgery, but she also doesn't want to become ugly. Everyone tries to convince her this is the only option. But Scarlett asks if they can guarantee that there will be no scars after the surgery. She says she will only agree if someone dares to bet their life on it. No one can answer, and Scarlett angrily storms out of the room. Goran gestures for Xenos to try speaking with her, since he seems quite skilled at dealing with spoiled kids like her. Xenos then follows Scarlett to the balcony and sees her gazing at her flock of birds. Now, she no longer has an arrogant attitude, but instead appears melancholic. Yet, Xenos hardly pays her any mind as he has just spotted an injured bird. He decided to examine the bird, and Scarlett recounted how she had found it in the garden yesterday. She said that bird would never fly again, and just like it, she would never regain the life she once had. However, he simply said that if she wanted to be stronger, from now on, she was a patient. He would help any patient, regardless of their social status. With that, he treated her, tended to the bird, and released it to fly away. A feeling of hope blossomed within her as the bird landed on her hand. Then, Xenos asked her if she wanted to get better and live her own life. This time, she agreed to undergo the surgery immediately. Scarlett was anesthetized in the operating room, and, temporarily, as the noble left, Gora turned to Crescent and Xenos. A warning echoed if the surgical team failed. They would regret it for life. They all tried their best, but Xenos told them to step aside so he could get it done quickly. He asked if he had done this before. Xenos replied that he had performed this operation once when he was young. Grabbing the scalpel, Xenos was surprised to see the other nurses using tools instead of magical swords for the surgery. He told Christian not to tremble like a coward. It would only lead to more accidents. Gresson mentioned that the difficulty of this surgery was rated A+, and tried to calm himself by recalling what the textbook said about the roots of the grotesque diseased tissue. However, Xenos quickly assessed Scarlett's condition and told Christian that the roots could vary in position and shouldn't be relied upon solely from textbooks. He pinpointed the exact location of the diseased roots, leaving Christian astonished that he could identify all that without even touching the patient. Just then, Goran was growing increasingly impatient and urged them to begin. Xenos told Christian to follow his lead. Thanks to the extremely precise guidance, they were able to successfully remove the diseased roots on Scarlett's face, impressing even Goran. However, just as Christian prepared to cut the last diseased part from Scarlett's face, he realized that the roots were entangled with the nerves, and he would need to cut those nerves to completely eradicate the disease. Both he and Goran panicked, knowing that restoring the damaged nerves would be extremely difficult, and there was a high chance Scarlett's face would become deformed if they cut the nerves. They debated whether to temporarily stitch up the wound and take her to a hospital for a second surgery. But Goran decided that leaving any diseased roots on her face would lead to even more severe consequences. He ordered Christian to cut the nerves to remove all the diseased roots, believing that it would cause less harm than leaving them behind. Suddenly, he took the scalpel from Christian's hands and shouted, blaming him for the cut.